She's going to stay for you. So.
Everybody gets so quiet all of a sudden.
I know.
Most of these people know each other. So.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Ogsbury. I'm the Executive Director of the Western Governors Association, and I am pleased to welcome you to this workshop of the Western Governors National Forest and Rangeland Management Initiative, a project of WGA Chairman and Montana Governor Steve Bullock. I'd like to observe at the outset that today's proceedings are being live streamed and recorded to ensure the broadest possible access to your wit and wisdom and knowledge. So accordingly, it will be very important for both panelists and questioners to speak directly into your microphone. So if you have a question or a comment from the audience, please wait for a microphone to arrive before you begin speaking. I want to thank you all for joining us today and for your willingness to participate in the work of Western Governors and to share your expertise and knowledge and perspective on the critical issues that we will cover over the next 2 days. And I'm pleased to recognize and thank our federal partners, the U.S. Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and the Natural Resources Conservation Service, all of which are participating in the full scope of initiative activities and which are providing generous financial support to this effort as well. I'd also like to acknowledge the generous contributions from our other sponsors and partners, the Idaho Forest Group, National Wild Turkey Federation, the American Sheep Industry Association, Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, Associated Logging Contractors, Nyman Enterprises, the Public Lands Council, and the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Public lands management. As a phrase, that sounds kind of dry and academic and bureaucratic. But what it connotes is rich and interesting and wildly important. Because when we talk about land management, we're talking about nearly every activity undertaken on Western lands. We're talking about wildfire, firefighting and mitigation and prevention. We're talking about recreation, camping and hunting and fishing and skiing and boating and climbing and motorized exploration. We're talking about economic activity, grazing and timber and mining. And we're talking about nature and water quality and species diversity and conservation. In fact, we're talking about those very things that make the Western United States abundant and special and truly extraordinary. Western lands are marked by different ownership patterns and management regimes. Adjacent lands in the same biome can look, react, and produce very differently from one another depending on who's managing it and for what purposes. In this initiative, by focusing on the steps that we can take to increase the overall health of our forests and rangelands, we're also taking steps to increase their resiliency to wildfire and other threats like insects and disease and invasive species. We hope that these conversations will yield a number of recommendations on best management practices and tools that can help Western governors, the federal government, and local communities to strengthen their forests and rangeland habitats, revitalize forest health, and help break the current vicious cycle of catastrophic Western wildfires. This is the fourth and final workshop of the initiative, all of which have been notable for the personal participation of the hosting governors. Montana Governor Steve Bullock in Missoula, Idaho Governor C.L. Butch Otter in Boise, Dennis Dugard, the Governor of South Dakota, and now Oregon Governor Kate Brown here in Bend. At these workshops, the governors have established a tenor of bipartisanship and a tone of collegiality that are infusing these conversations about forest and rangeland management. Yes, we have different priorities and viewpoints and interests and recommendations, but let's trust that we're all motivated by a sincere desire to improve the health, protect the beauty, and ensure the abundance of our precious Western lands for generations to come. As has been said many times, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. Our host, the Honorable Kate Brown, assumed the governorship of Oregon during a difficult period in the state's history. Installed suddenly as the chief government officer in 2015 upon the resignation of her predecessor, it was said that she was thrown into the deep end of the pool. I clearly remember her response to that suggestion. "I wasn't thrown in," she said. "I dove in." And that response reflects unbridled optimism, an eagerness to tackle problems, and a fearless embrace of the responsibilities of leadership. Surely these character traits, as well as the governor's infectious and unrelenting enthusiasm, helped persuade the electorate of the Beaver State to retain her when she was elected in her own right last November. Kate Brown, possessed of a rich and fascinating biography, was well equipped to assume the mantle of leadership when she took office as governor. Born in Spain and raised in Minnesota, she received her undergraduate education at the University of Colorado in Boulder and earned her law degree from the Northwestern School of Law at Lewis and Clark College. Among other things, she practiced law, taught at Portland State University, worked with the Juvenile Rights Project, and co-founded the Oregon Women's Health and Wellness Alliance. Prior to serving as Secretary of State, the governor served for 17 years in the state legislature, 5 in the Oregon House and 12 in the Oregon State Senate. In 2004, she made history when she became the first woman in Oregon to serve as Senate Majority Leader. She served as Secretary of State from 2009 to 2015, and she's only the second woman in history to serve as Oregon's Chief Executive. One of the things that distinguishes the Western Governors Association is its fierce commitment to bipartisanship. Based on this trait alone, the association and Governor Brown are an excellent match. In 2009, the Aspen Institute named Brown as one of the 24 rising stars in American politics and awarded her with a Rodell Fellowship. The program is a 2-year fellowship designed to break down partisan barriers and explore the responsibilities of leadership and good governance. During her time in the legislature, she led a bipartisan group of legislators to pass Oregon's most significant campaign finance reform in a generation. Among her first acts as governor, she brought Democrats and Republicans together to pass ethics reform, requiring full disclosure of all lobbying activities and cracking down on officials who abuse public office for private gain. Given the governor's leadership, commitment to jobs and growing a regional economy, her defense of the environment and demonstrable bipartisanship, I can think of no one better to kick off this workshop for which we have gathered. It is my distinct honor to introduce the 38th governor of the great state of Oregon, the Honorable Kate Brown.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so delighted that you were able to take time out of your busy schedules to join us today in beautiful Bend. It's my pleasure to welcome you here, and I want to say thank you to Mayor Casey Roats for hosting us. I hear he's really good with a snowplow, so thank you, Mayor Roats. I think he didn't see that in his job description. Also, I know that Bend City Councilor Sally Russell is here to join us. Thank you, Sally, for being here. Delighted to have you join us as well. I know it was a punishment to have you all come join us in Bend, where there's beautiful sunshine, an incredible amount of snow. I hope some of you are able to get out and enjoy it over the next couple of days. But Bend is truly Central Oregon. I liken it to the heart of Oregon, and it's a great place to ski, to bicycle ride. We did mountain biking here last summer, and of course to hike and other many activities. So please enjoy while you're here. I do want to say a thank you to Jim and the entire Western Governors Association team for organizing today's workshop. Thank you all for your time and energy in putting all of this together. I am a very committed, though not necessarily active, member of the Western Governors Association because I love our ability to work across party lines to tackle the issues facing Western states. And it's been a thrill to have an opportunity to work with my fellow, I think there's 1 or 2 sister Western governors. There's actually two sister governors on the issues that we are facing in the West. but I'm really excited about Governor Steve Bullock's vision and his leadership in this forest and rangeland management initiative. And I'm just delighted about the opportunity to have these forums as a model for greater collaboration between states, and also to give us a platform to share best practices and policy options for forest and rangeland management within our state as well. I want to be a governor for all of Oregon, and I'm very committed to making sure we have an economy that thrives in every single corner of the state. And I think you all know that our urban areas, I know Bend is growing quite rapidly, and the Portland metropolitan areas are growing, as I described, like a out of control teenage boy. And the challenge, I think, for us moving forward is our rural communities. And I think there are a number of strategies that we need to pursue to make sure that folks can get good paying jobs in our rural communities. I'm certainly continuing to pursue strategies to accelerate the pace, scale, and quality of restoration on our federal forests. And I'm also interested in investing in programs to help rural entrepreneurs get the capital and expertise that they need to build their small businesses into thriving economic engines. And then we're certainly working hard to invest in technologies that inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs. Unmanned aerial vehicles and cross-laminated timber aren't just the hot tech trends of the moment. I see these as brilliant innovations that can't grow without space or trees, two items that rural Oregon has in abundance. Given that our federal public lands account for 60% of the total forest lands in Oregon, I believe it's absolutely key that we foster strong partnerships with the U.S. Forest Service, our local and our tribal communities, the forest products industry, and conservation interests. Across the state of Oregon, we are seeing our climate changing in some parts of the state more rapidly than others. I don't know if all the snow in Eastern Oregon is a result of climate change. I certainly see it as a blessing, but it's certainly impacting a lot of lives right now. I talked to the mayor of Ontario last week. They've had over 100 structures cave in, and all of the snow shovels, the snow rakes, and easily accessible salt have been sold out. So I don't know if this is what the future portends to come, but it's been very challenging for many of us throughout the state over these last several weeks. But the latest data released by NOAA confirms 3 consecutive years of record warmth for the globe. And we know that the past recent years have been some of the hottest on record in the Pacific Northwest. This obviously winter being somewhat to the contrary. Drought and wildfire threaten family incomes and our local economies. Today, wildfires on average burn twice as much land every year now as they did 40 years ago. And I recall, and I know I saw some of you there when I toured Eastern Oregon, Grant County, following the 2015 Canyon Creek complex. In total, the fire burned over 10,000 acres and cost more than $240 million. And I know Mark Webb here was one of the firefighters helping push it back. We were, I think, very fortunate. I think it's really that things weren't worse. I think it's imperative that we take lessons from each fire season. And I'm so proud of the work that we have done to collaborate and restore our federal forests and rangelands throughout Eastern Oregon. Most recently, to better coordinate our restoration efforts, I signed a Good Neighbor Authority agreement with the U.S. Forest Service earlier last year. The agreement builds on the state's existing investments to improve federal forest health, support collaboration, and promote jobs and our rural economies. In signing the agreement, I considered what I've heard and seen across rural Oregon. Many times what I hear from families is a hometown they love and hope that their children have the choice to return home someday and find good paying jobs in those communities. I think it's truly amazing to see the difference, even in a single opportunity, what that can make in a rural community. I don't know if Zach has arrived, but the story I'm going to share with you today is Zach Williams. He's a fifth-generation resident in Grant County. He grew up helping his dad run cattle on the family ranch, which is now part of the Strawberry Mountain Wilderness area. He spent his summers working in the mill in the family's rough-cut sawmill and went on to earn an environmental economics policy management degree and studied natural resource and environmental law in Corvallis. Like a lot of 24-year-olds, Zach had choices, but he wanted to come home to Grant County. In 2006, the timber sale program on the Malheur National Forest was effectively zero, and disagreement over forest management entangled the U.S. Forest Service. Grant County Commissioner Boyd Britton knew there had to be a better way. He invited environmental attorney Susan Jane Brown, no relation, out to spend a day in the woods and even promised to bring her back to town. Eventually, the Blue Mountain Forest Partners was formed, a local forest collaborative that has built trust and social agreement to reinstate active management on the Malheur National Forest. Zach is now both a board member of the Blue Mountain Forest Partners and a contractor for Iron Triangle Logging, LLC. Iron Triangle received the 10-year stewardship contract on the Malheur National Forest in 2003, and after the contract, housing sales increased 200%, school enrollment increased, and unemployment rates declined. Because of the sustainable supply of wood on the Malheur National Forest, Iron Triangle is now in the process of reopening and upgrading a post and pole mill in Seneca, Oregon, that's been sitting idle for years. The renewed focus and increased restoration allows Zach and his wife Marissa to raise their 2 daughters and son in the community that they grew up in, and allows Zach to provide critical leadership in the community as vice chair of the Grant School Board and chairman of the John Day Parks and Rec Board. I know a lot of folks in rural Oregon wear many hats, and Zach is a great example of that. I see this as an opportunity that changed the civic infrastructure of the entire community. Thanks to this particular partnership, we've seen a 14% increase in timber harvests and a 16% increase in timber-related jobs as a result of partnerships like these. I believe we have to continue to search for similar innovative programs that are both good for the economy and the environment. And I think we can do both. We can't talk about forest and rangeland health and growing our rural economies without acknowledging the crucial role that water plays in our quality of life and our livelihood. Addressing the possibility of water shortages has been front and center in my administration since day one. In Oregon, we're working very hard to take steps to mitigate drought, prevent wildfire, and better prepare to combat wildfires of the future. In my budget for the proposed biennium, we proposed $32 million in bond grant funding for local water projects, which will help meet the needs of rural communities, agriculture, and of course, the environment. I truly believe that by working together, we are much better positioned to rise and meet these needs, and in the process, improve environmental health and species recovery. The sage grouse agreements, which I know a number of you worked on, prove that this is absolutely possible. For over a year, Oregon's sage grouse plan held together without litigation, and I'm hoping we're going to be able to say that again. And it's not just in Eastern Oregon. The Oregon chub proves that this is possible. The first fish in United States history to be removed from the endangered species list, the first ever. And I think that deserves an applause for what we've done in Oregon. And that's not it. For the first time in over 30 years, the snowy plover is once again nesting on the Nehalem Spit on the Oregon coast. So the recovery of the sage grouse, the Oregon chub, and the snowy plover are not accidents. We found it is what happens when Oregonians work together, when we reject the notion of choosing sides. This is the Oregon way, our collaborative efforts. And together, as proud members of the Western Governors Association, representing the very, very diverse communities across the West, I truly believe that the more we work together, the more we can accomplish together. We've certainly benefited tremendously from this collaboration in Oregon. I'm very happy to say that we have 3 national forests that are 10 years removed from litigation of forest management projects. That's a pretty dang good record. I believe it takes a constellation of approaches and the work of all of us to ensure that our economy continues to thrive in every single corner of the state. So the work's not easy, our challenges are great, but I am confident that our resolve is greater. I look forward to working with you. I hope that we continue to create more opportunities for families like Zach's to take advantage of Oregon. He's a 5th generation Oregonian. His children are 6th generation. I'm hoping, it's probably a little premature for his family at this point, but I'm hoping that the 7th generation will be able to work and thrive in communities like Grant County. So thank you all for being here. I look forward to hearing the results. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for those remarks, which really provide just the right frame for the conversations we'll be having over the next 2 days. It is a rare pleasure to introduce the Deputy Chief of the U.S. Forest Service. It was not a real challenge to persuade Leslie to come to Bend, a very special corner of the earth in which she worked and lived earlier in her career. And what a career it's been. You could say it's her career in forestry started as a Girl Scout and then as a worker in a youth conservation corps. She's a biologist who has worn many hats in the Forest Service. She has fought fire and surveyed wildlife. She's managed communications and public relations. She is the former regional forester in Montana. And as deputy chief, her portfolio is now narrowly limited to everything. We are deeply grateful for the service's participation in these workshops and for its financial support. Moreover, I've had an opportunity to visit with Leslie about developing an ever stronger relationship between the Department of Agriculture and its Forest Service and Western Governors. And I'm optimistic that we will seize many opportunities to work as authentic partners on a wide range of issues. In the meantime, it's my honor to introduce the Deputy Chief of the U.S. Forest Service, Leslie Weldon.
Good afternoon. And Jim's right, it wasn't very difficult to persuade me to come back here. As I look across the room, I see a lot of faces from folks that I worked very closely with during the 7 years I had the privilege of working for the Forest Service, but also being a part of the communities in Central Oregon. And it might be hard for me on Wednesday to get back on a plane to go back, but we'll see. So I'm really happy to be here today. Want to thank the Western Governors Association, Governor Bullock, Governor Brown, Jim Ogsbury, all the staff at Western Governors Association, and the folks in the Forest Service. Christine Daw, I don't know if you're here, and Jim Pena, everyone who helped put this session together, and glad you're all here. I really appreciate having a little bit of time to share with you some perspectives that'll hope really help you engage well with the opportunity that's in front of us with this workshop today, and share a little bit about what's going on back in Washington. So I see these sessions of really helping us chart a strong path for shared stewardship with the states, with federal land managers and tribes and communities. I look forward to listening and learning over the next 2 days, and thank you for allowing me to share some of my perspectives. So right now, back in Washington, D.C., the Forest Service, just like every other federal agency right now, is preparing for a transition. We're actually in transition now with the inauguration of our new president last Friday. We have a nominee for the Secretary of Agriculture, former Governor of Georgia, Sonny Perdue, and a new Secretary for Natural Resources and Environment, NRE, which is the section of U.S. Department of Agriculture under which both the Forest Service and the Natural Resources Conservation Service report. We'll get a new undersecretary there as well. So we're preparing for new leadership in USDA, and our job at this time in the Forest Service is to make sure we do a few things very well to ensure a smooth transition and new productive relationships. The first of those is for us to be of service to the new administration by developing strong and responsive working relationships. Those are actually starting today. There's a handful of new people that are showing up in the offices that the Forest Service and NRCS report to that we're immediately beginning to help them to get started. And our Associate Chief, Dan Hiron, who works closely with Chief Tidwell, is stepping over to be the acting undersecretary behind Robert Bonney until that position gets filled. So it'll be an excellent way for the Forest Service to continue working with NRE. And of course, Chief Tom Tidwell continues to lead the Forest Service. The second thing we need to do really well is share information about the mission, goals, and outcomes that are delivered through the suite of Forest Service programs and activities. We'll share our current challenges facing all the nation's forests and grasslands as we describe this through the Forest Service strategic plan goals. And just quickly, our strategic plan goals are to sustain the nation's forests and grasslands, to deliver benefits to people, to apply our knowledge globally, and to excel as an organization on behalf of the public. We'll also work with the new administration to assist them in identifying how the work of the Forest Service can contribute to their goals. And that's all in the beginning. As you well know, our relationships and all the work will likely rapidly evolve over the next number of months and years. And we look forward to being effective and productive with our new leadership. The other thing that we'll share is the importance of being in good partnership and relationships with states, tribal governments, counties, citizens, interest groups, local leaders, industry, and businesses. And I know many of you in the groups that you represent are developing new relationships and sharing your ideas with the new administration, which is also very important. So the Forest Service was very happy to hear about Governor Bullock's idea to host these workshops. It's a great idea, and Chief Tidwell readily agreed to be part of it. And to do these across the West and invite the level of information sharing gives us all a real-time understanding of the state of our efforts at forest conservation, the biggest challenges and opportunities, and the bold actions that are needed to move forward together. Placing the workshops in different Western communities keeps our attention on the uniqueness of small communities and the distinct ecosystems that they're connected to. We know there are multiple ways to work together, and that only the people from these places can determine how best to work together. And as this round of workshops are completed, we'll be able to identify the most common needs for change from across the workshops that will help us to identify new policy that can spur overall progress, including opportunities that will be coming up with our next Farm Bill. And we'll also be able to share, as Governor Brown said, the best practices that each of us have that the best practices that we all have that we can immediately put to work once we get those shared and out. A few months ago, I participated in a Chiefs review in the northern region of the Forest Service. In 5 days in mid-October, over 40 people from Idaho, Montana, North Dakota shared their perspectives on the values and importance of the public, private, and tribal landscapes under their care, and in working with the Forest Service. And I think Governor Brown gave an excellent overview of all of those values mentioned here for the state of Oregon, but I think apply in many places across the West. The folks we talked to mirror many of the people that are in the room here today. Their connections to the land are diverse. They talked about the opportunities and challenges that must be taken on if we're to be successful in shared stewardship. Almost everyone needed something different to be successful in their interest, but they saw the value of working together if anyone was to be successful. We spent a day of the review with leaders from the Salish and Kootenai tribes who have excellent forest management, fire management, and wilderness programs. They shared their worldview and pointed out that the worldview of the Forest Service and other conservation groups are very different and shaped by very different history and relationships with the land. Even so, they recognized a common affinity to take care of the land and a wish to truly be recognized as leaders in land stewardship. The Nez Perce were also with us. They continue to contribute greatly to the health of the watersheds and aquatic habitats and express the importance of formal government-to-government consultation, which is the basis for addressing land use under treaties, even in this era of collaboration. They believe that strong trust and honest relationships are important to good conservation. The state foresters from Idaho and Montana, and I see Bob Harrington here, shared the progress being made using the forestry provisions and authorities under the 2014 Farm Bill. It seems just like yesterday that new Farm Bill got passed, yet we're ready again to look at what the new Farm Bill can bring us, and we're looking forward to that. So those state foresters told us about the breakthroughs that are happening that have launched new ways for states and the Forest Service to share employees, expertise, and financial resources across boundaries to increase active forest management in priority areas on the national forest. They stated that it was good relationships and the commitment from leaders, the state foresters, the regional foresters, the forest supervisors, and their staff, that was critical to making this happen and to making it stick. They also acknowledged the stress to their organization's culture that come from changing the way that we do work, but see the value and are going to stick with it. Based on their experiences so far, they see new opportunities to improve cross-boundary work that we can pursue under the next Farm Bill. Aldo Leopold's birthday was on January 11th, a week or so ago. Many of you know the impact that he had on conservation. His conviction that people are responsible for keeping the land healthy as we use it and as it changes. Aldo Leopold said and wrote a lot of things. He said, "There are two things that interest me, the relation of people to each other and the relation of people to the land," unquote. Do we believe this is true today? Who are the people and what is the land? In 1949, when a Sand County Almanac was published with an elegant set of essays and stark observations, America had a challenging set of issues to deal with. People were leaving rural areas for jobs in cities. Farming was expanding in scale. Post-war population was beginning to grow, as was our economy. A lot of new homes were built for new families. Tribal nations' culture continued to be anchored in the connection between life and the land, and state and federal forestry and fish and wildlife agencies were the anchors of land conservation. Protections for the environment were evolving, and Aldo Leopold, along with other conservation leaders, foresaw a need for change and a need for people to care for the land. So fast forward to today. How do we put the current challenges in the context of where the country was in the 1940s? Well, since then, we have benefited from a lot of learning, laws, and work to care for these lands, and we have a better scientific understanding of land and land management than ever before. We have also a wide range of civic organizations and institutions, private corporations and businesses that engage based on their values for people and the land. And of course, today we have different drivers and threats to pay attention to. The funding for forest and grassland management is not growing, and wildfire costs remain high. Recreation demands and the things people want from these lands continue to grow. We know ecosystems will continue to change due to the changing climate. And we have seen the perfect storm of conditions that caused the Western bark beetle epidemic, the continuing fire seasons of enormous size, cost, and severity, the over 112 million dead trees in the Sierras. And these are all these are all forest die-offs and forest ecosystem changes that are occurring at a rapid pace. And writing new chapters on these lands and on these waters. We know we must find better ways especially to live with and manage fire as the primary influence over the future of resilient forest landscapes. These events, and many others I know that each of you can relate to from your own experiences, have also put pressure on our relationships and have gotten us to the point where we must work together. We must work together to identify what work is most important and why. And we need to find better ways of putting all of our knowledge, experiences, history, and ideas together to be the best stewards possible for these lands. The conversations over the next day will show where we have made progress and where we have big hurdles to somehow overcome. Hurdles in regulation and policy, in shifting cultural norms around authority and sharing leadership, and sharing information. But we've made progress. As example, the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Act, which started now some 6 years ago, this program took a huge leap towards sharing stewardship with citizens and restoring very large landscapes and pursuing the many beneficial outcomes these landscapes have for the communities who depend on them. It guaranteed funding for up to 10 years. It requires public and private partnerships and monitoring. The long-term work committed under CFLRA is showing amazing results. On the Deschutes, on the Willamette, the Malheur, Colville, Okanagan, Wenatchee, and other Northwest forests. And the same is true for the Joint Chiefs projects between the Forest Service, Natural Resource Conservation Service, and across many land boundaries that are occurring across the country. Thanks to all of you who are working in these collaboratives and for sharing what you're learning with others. Thanks to the forest supervisors, the rangers, the staff, who are actively participating and are sharing leadership and inviting ways to seek solutions together. Also, the impact of elected official involvement and support has been a key part of success for all of these collaboratives. There have also been successes between the Forest Service and tribal governments in cost boundary management and partnerships. We have more opportunities to pursue and build on the earlier successes and what we have learned to complete more shared forest and watershed management under the Tribal Forest Protection Act. And as I described for Idaho and Montana, the use of the Good Neighbor Authority is truly finding new ways to share resources between state agencies and the Forest Service here in Oregon. And it's very encouraging and exciting to hear the new commitments and the creative approaches that are emerging as Good Neighbor Authority is being used by the states. The Forest Service is grateful to Governor Brown and the Oregon State Legislature for their decisions to allocate part of its state budget for forest management work on federal lands, again, to get more work done, to support jobs, and deliver benefits to their citizens. Also, thanks to Jim Pena for his work to ensure that the return on investment from this partnership occur the way they need to. Also reminding everyone that the Good Neighbor Authority allows any state agency to develop agreements with the Forest Service where it makes sense for their missions. State transportation, parks and recreation, the folks who are responsible for mine reclamation, and others. There are possibilities in addition to forestry and the Fish and Wildlife agencies. So let's find ways to experiment with other work and push for more resource benefits and services to people by harnessing resources from these programs as well. It's also great to see how all of you are connecting with people in this work through volunteers, citizen science, and teaching about the land. This includes the youth involvement through education, such as the Deschutes Children's Forest, and hiring teens and young adults to do conservation work as part of Conservation Service Corps. A common theme for all of our work should be getting more citizens to care about land and about good stewardship. All of these efforts build on relationships, trust, a willingness to take risks and experiment together, and to learn and adapt as we go. This approach will give us more benefits in the future, and it will continue to change how we manage federal lands. Having said that, I know that over the next couple of days, we'll hear about the challenges and difficulties associated with this work and how we in the Forest Service need to be flexible and adaptable to be most responsive. This feedback is necessary and we welcome it, and should come with good discussions about what all of you are experiencing and how to move forward with both the wins and the failures, which we also call learning experiences. So our challenge really is to continue finding ways to bring our experiences, science, ideas together with a shared set of values and principles about what it means to successfully manage public lands, along with all of the lands whose forests, watersheds, forage, and ecosystems contribute to the health of people and communities. I think your efforts are just beginning to reveal what can be accomplished under Good Neighbor Authority, under the Tribal Forest Protection Act, and of all of the authorities that we currently have in place. Be creative and push for more conservation outcomes for forest management, aquatics, fisheries, access, and recreation. Similarly, we should think together innovatively about how to deal with management challenges and not be limited by conventional thinking about how to address them. There's strength in the fact that we have so many states who have the ability to experiment. And we want to encourage you to look at different options and to have robust and continuing conversations about what works and what doesn't. Working in a type of cooperative and maybe even generating a little bit of competition, but only if you can do it in a way that's friendly and enables you to continue to work well together. That's going to help us improve more quickly as well across the board. Even though we still have a ways to go to become even more fully united in sharing stewardship of our forest lands, I think we're at a great place and have a lot to build on. I hope that you will learn and share in this workshop, and that your learning will demonstrate that we are up to the challenge. All of you are working hard towards the goal of caring for the nation's forests, lands, and waters through people and communities, and on behalf of people and communities. I want to thank you for being here and for your contributions to this workshop. And thanks for letting me share my thoughts with you today and have a productive workshop. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Leslie, both for those remarks and for your partnership. As we perform a quick set change here on the dais, let's give the governor